Well, before I introduce myself, I would like to say that I'm very happy to be here for the second time ever at RootedCON. Last year's presentation was welcomed, and now this year we have Jose Carlos with me. It is the first presentation of Jose Carlos at RootedCON. I will introduce myself. My name is Alvaro Villaverde. You may know me because I am at the Hacking Center of Everest, Aerospatial and Defense. I primarily do pen testing, training, and research. I started as a techie, and then I move on. I got promoted through IT services, through development, and I ended up in cybersecurity. With me, with Jose Carlos. So thank you everyone for being here. It is my first RootedCON conference. I hope that you like my presentation. In terms of my career, I've been working for 7 years now. I started as developer of JavaScript web applications, but I always liked security, so I was doing security things on the side up until I had the opportunity to join the Everest Hacking Center. And now I am a security architect, and I'm doing cloud security, SecBox, and anything that comes up. This is that our presentation will be about the following. First of all, pen testing, the process of it. Then we would move on to the realities, or what we found during our both internal and external pen testing. We will tell you about mechanic pen testing, which is an idea, something that we thought of to improve those parts that are not so much better fun in terms of offensive security. And then Jose Carlos will tell you more about how we've implemented our solution. Then we will see what is ahead for us after showing you a demo, and then we will leave some time for questions. What is an intrusion technique? Pen testing. This is not pen testing. This is physical intrusion testing, and it is not going well. In intrusion technique, we use the tools that an actual attacker will use, and malicious insider, an unhappy worker who wants to harm the company. We simulate those techniques, those tools, to see how far we can get and how far an attacker could potentially get. So first of all, we would start by evading or bypassing the access through several tools such as Machanger or several sniffers to capture the negotiation authentication packets, and then to implement replay attacks or to decipher them. Once we have gained access to the network because we have bypassed a NAP or any other, we will move on to use NetDiscover, SS Client, and Nmap and trace route. We will try to find other networks. Once we have the network, we launch a mechanism of vulnerability, Nexus, OpenBus, Nexpose, or any other. We will launch it for a couple of days up until we get output. Because we will not be drinking coffee up until we have the results, we look for ports, Nmap, Unicorn Scan, or any other port scan that you may like. And as we look for ports, we analyze the services that we find. For that, we use Nmap, and then when it returns ports, then we use SMB scan for sample services, then SNMP walk when we scan the SNMP service that we found, and then GoBuster help us scan web servers in an attempt to look for applications that have not been referenced. Then we move on to exploiting services. For that, well, at the end of the day, we often use meta exploit then crackmac.exec for Windows services, Hydra for brute force on different services, and then we use independent specific exploits that we find in GitHub. We also exploit configuration, especially network configurations. So for instance, having IPv6 enabled with no protection or unsecured. So we use man in the middle to poison Windows services, which are easier to infect than IPv4, responder to poison BIOS packets, and NTL relay. So when we do man in the middle, the authentication against servers that do not have the packet signature, authentications are redirected against them, and then we use them to gain access without using any credentials. Then we also use Power Exploit, Mimikatz, Empire, Linenum for escalating privileges. So these tools do not fall under any specific category. They are just the different switches offering different things. Mimikatz allowed us to play around with Windows passwords. Empire is smart for launching it, and then when you launch it, it moves alone through the network, and then we go for Prophet. For that, we install persistence, we access different mechanisms such as token capturing, and we use as shuttle for pivoting with other networks. And we also get configurations, we analyze them, we see what we can do with them. And as programmers of visual as such, I continue to use GoTo. And then we go back to analysis step. We have lots of information, we have lots of things to research on, and we want to go back to the beginning. Automatic tools stop here. They do not even go to GoTo. They just stop at exploiting. In terms of the red team, what are the realities, what we found in our intuition testing? First of all, that we are overloaded with information. If you have ever implemented scanning on all the SMB services in a domain, and no matter how much you adjust filters to search or to find key files, you will see that lots of information, lots of data returned, lots of config files, many scripts that requires or takes up lots of time to research, and we are likely to not to leave something unnoticed. There are also very many iterative tasks, repetitive tasks. You have to test device by device. If there are some automatic tools, but the automatic tools do not include all the credentials. Sometimes you have to produce the list by hand about the equipment that you have. So that's another thing that we also find in our testing. So rabbit holes. Sometimes we dedicate hours to follow exploit chain, and at the end of the day we don't get any results. So that's really disappointing. It's been a waste of time. We have gotten nowhere. And very close to that, the low-hanging fruit. That is to say, vulnerabilities that are very easy to exploit do not report. Most of them do not return a lot, and this will be a wonderful task to be automated, because at the end of the day you get the results that you want, and then it saves lots of time. What about SOCs, the blue teams? What do they found? Well, first of all, they find that they have limited control on what pen testing does. Even if you narrow down the scope and lots of information is being delivered, and even if the hacker is in the very same room, at the end of the day, you don't fully know what is happening, what the hacker is doing, and to early detect it. Then you need to organize yourself with them. Blue teams have to be very careful or aware of critical days at the organization. They need to find a time, and then the red teams, offensive teams, need to be available at that time space, okay, time slot. So it's difficult to organize that. Then documentation given for pen testing often gets like 2 weeks. After that, it needs to be debugged, it needs to be kind of clean, and more difficult even to feed all that with the logs that you got from IDS, IPS, etc. And at the end of the day, we just don't like to feed a hacker so that he tells us again that we have a trait enabled in an IP phone that we cannot use. What will be the solution to all these repetitive tasks, to all these scheduling challenges, limited control challenges? Well, the solution to all that would be a mechanic pen tester. So we base our solution on the analysis that we've made in all the steps. Intrusion analysis is reduced down to 3 steps: listing, analyzing, and exploiting. When we analyze something, very likely we would find something to be exploited. By the time we will make our exploit, we will have new networks, new lists, etc. For instance, ports that were unknown before, then they become open. When they're open, we analyze them, and then when we exploit them, we are likely to get interesting information, relevant information, and then we go back to the cycle, a cycle that will be on up until it's finished. I'll give you an example. Imagine that mechanic pen tester is alone, doesn't know what's around it, network it's in. So the logical thing to do is to ask the DSP to tell us where we are. So then we get that information, and now we know the network where we are. Once we have the network, the mechanic pen tester can list it, analyze it to see the services around it. So we have desktops, laptops, and phones, always phones. If we were successful in exploiting one of these equipment, we could find that there are some local admin credentials. If we exploit SMB service or any other service that was vulnerable to an exploit, it returns a username and a password. The logical thing to do would be to try out that username and password in other teams to gain administrator access, and then to list it. So this is the CHP server. And that server also gives us access to a new network. If we use the HCP server for pivoting, that could help us list or number the new network. And this will let us know another network to be numbered. Then we would exploit it. We will get information to be analyzed. So this is theory. This is what we thought of well, about mechanic pen testing. So now I'll tell you how we implement it. Alvaro has told you about the pen tester and the reality that we often face. Many times we have to perform lots of repetitive tasks, scanning, finding hosts, open services, available services, credentials, repetitive tasks. What can we do so that a hacker doesn't get bored? He just, gets excited with what he does. So we thought about mechanic pentester, and we gave it the name SecAP, Security Analysis Platform. We want to have a toolkit for pen testing. We want those tools to be used in a smart manner, autonomous manner, and automated manner, so that all the tasks of numbering, analyzing, and exploiting are carried out safely. So we wanted this to be easily used by the tools that we often use. Therefore, we use an API REST for that. We also wanted it to be portable, so that we do not have any problems with it when we take it from one client to another, depending whether it is Windows or OS or Linux. We also wanted it to be scalable, because pen testing and analysis tools, we know that there are new tools out there every day, or sometimes the tools change. So therefore, we want it to be scalable so that we can add new modules, new features, and we wanted it to be fully secure. So we wanted it to come in with rolling with authentication, and we also wanted to use open source technologies. How did we do it? So we develop an AP REST, and we use the framework of Express.js. Those of you who have programmed in Node, you see how simple it is to do that through Node. Express allows you to set up an API in a couple of minutes. We wanted it to be portable, so we used Docker, and Docker Compose allowed us to start all the modules in an easy and simple manner. Then it also helped us to have everything ready to be configured. So therefore, we took it to our clients depending on the despite the operating system, we could configure it and start it easily and quickly. So this is a tool that we take it with us. It is not on the cloud. We just take it with us in our laptop, or sometimes we use our client's PC. So the only thing that we need is Docker Engine. We also want it to be fully scalable. API REST and Docker compiler give us that modularity, a modular capability. If I want to add a new module, I just get a new container, I just hook it, I configure the database for it to know that there is a new module, and that's it. Security authentication, we use Clock, is an IAM that allows us to do authentication through O2. We use a user password. We gave a role to we either give a role to it, or we use a token that we use to get to the API. And then it also fills with the requirement of it being open source: MySQL, Node.js, Docker, and Keycloak. So this is what we were looking for, what we were after, what wanted to be in our technology. Now let us take a look at the components and see how the components interact with each other. We have core including or containing API REST. API REST, we just log into it through Kcloak for auditing creation, launching, tool management, audit management, or even reporting management. We have our database when we store everything that we get, all the information, and then another extremely important part of the tool are our connectors. We are kind of wrappers that we find in embedded tools, and they help us launch scanning from our tools. Connectors are independent from each other. Our core send the request to the connectors. They are launched. They get information from the network or the assets in our network, and then that is returned to the core. In the core, we have a decider, launchers, and analyzers. They take care of all those tasks. So the decider thinks and selects the next step to be taken. Launchers connect with connectors to launch them depending on the configuration that we give them, and then analyzers analyze the responses from the tools. They are connected. Well, this is connected to the mechanic orange, and then that information is stored in the database. The process is repeated, so on and so forth, up until no more assets, network access as found. All this is scalable. We have a connector for nmap, another one for Hydra, has the catch. We want these to continue to grow. And if we want to add new tools, we would like to scale it all. And now we will see how this works. Well, as I said, we have core and the connectors. At the core, we have API REST. Here, when we get to network, what do? We create a new audit. We want to do a new analysis. For that, we need to give a name to the audit, a description, and it also needs a starting point. Starting point may be knowing nothing. We just log into the network, we just listen to the host there, or sometimes when we take a Nexus or OpenBus, we know the host that we want to scan, and in that case, if we are aware of the host, we just tell it about the host, and then they will be taken down. Imagine that we are aware of the hosts. Here we will have to give the name of the audit and the name of the host that we want to be scanned, and then the configuration of the tools that we want to use. That is to say, the connectors that we want to launch. If we just don't want to do that, one that is stored by default on the database will be used. Imagine that we have the nmap connector. You know that nmap can be configured in very many different ways. Some ways are more noisy than others. So if we want nmap not to be noisy, not to disturb the client on a daily basis, then we tell the audit the way we want the tool to be configured. Once we have the audit, what we want to scan, and the configuration of the tools, we decide to launch the audit. This is the launch method. It calls the decider that decides on the next step to be taken.
The decision maker talks to the database, and he says, "I have some hosts that have been given. Otherwise, I would like to I'd have to launch a discover. But in this case, I know the hosts, so directly instead of doing that, I'm going to scan the nmap. The decision maker has launched that nmap. He called the launcher. The launcher recovers from the database the configuration that I've told it that I'm going to use to launch the nmap. Depending on the tool that I'm going to launch, the launchers would retrieve some information or other. So the launcher calls the connector. Just imagine that the first one is nmap. We call the nmap connector, and nmap does its stuff. The connector does its stuff, and it returns the information with the first filtering done by the connector. It returns it back to the analyzer, and the analyzer does everything related to ranking of the assets obtained. Imagine nmap in this case. Well, there are many ports, many services, web services, SSH services, Samba services, and maybe there could be some credentials there. And the analyzer distributes and ranks it. So the analyzer says, okay, so this is an asset, this is a vulnerability, and within the assets I have the type of asset. I rank it according to the type of asset that it has been, and within the vulnerabilities I rank them depending on the vulnerabilities. This is stored at the database so that the decision maker knows what's the next step that he has to take. The decision maker acts, he calls a launcher. The launcher talks to the tool connector, and the full process is repeated. So let's see with a little more of detail each of these components. The decision maker, as we've said, has a look at the assets and the type of assets we have in the database. The type of assets we have in the database are these ones. This would increase as we improve the tool. We have networks, hosts, HTTP, HTTPS, Samba, etc. Everything that you can see here. So the decision maker talks to the asset database. There are assets that are still pending on a scanning. The ones that have been already scanned are as finalized. But if they're still pending, I have a look at what type of asset it is. And depending on the type of asset, I decide to what launcher I'm going to call. So I call to the launcher, and I can have some connectors in parallel. Launchers. I have a different launcher for every tool. Every tool has its own inputs. So we have a launcher for each tool. So they call the connectors, and the connectors would do their job, and they would return the information. They would launch would give the information back to the analyzers. There are tools that retrieve a lot of information, but there are other type of analyzers and that are generic ones. There are analyzers that return almost always the same, and the treatment is almost similar. So we have created some generic ones in order to not to repeat the logic, and this is what we've repeated. The decision maker calls the launcher calls the tool returns the information to the analyzers so that they can run the information, and they store it at the database. Let's move to the most important thing. These are the drugos, the connectors. The connectors, well, we've said this before, one for every tool. This can grow as much as we want. The decision maker calls the launcher calls to the connector, and the connector starts to analyze the network. It starts to analyze the network. Our drugos start to hit everybody. We're going to pick all the information out of the network as much as we can. We're going to return it to the analyzers. Our drugos are really happy because they've been able to take everything they could from the network, and they will give it to the analyzers. The analyzers structure the information depending on the type of asset and depending on the type of vulnerability. They store it on the database so that the decision maker can have a look at the database and can see that everything very tidy, and to say, well, the next launcher that I have to call is this one. He calls it, and so on and so forth. So, as we were saying before, what we accomplish eventually is that all the connectors can be launched even in parallel. In this case, we have instances for the same tool. Imagine that I launch Nmap, and Nmap is configured so that it can launch two Nmaps at the same time. So I could be launching two Nmaps at the same time on the same machine. This is configurable. When I send the tools configuration, we can also set the number of instances that we want. For example, the customer has given me a small PC, and I can't launch many tools at the same time, so I need less instances at the same time. So how do we use all this? We have the functionality, but the API network, the AP REST, what are its functionalities? Well, these are the methods that we have. We have methods for audit management, creation, deletion, and modification, methods to set the drugos, to set the tools, and eventually what we do is that when everything has been launched, imagine that I see that Nmap is really noisy and want to change the configuration. So I change the setting on Nmap in hot, and at the next iteration it will be launched with a good setting. audit launchings, well, I can stop it and it can end it up. And a very important topic that is very good for advisors, and this is report generation. When the customer wants information and a pen tester has to make the report, and that's the most boring thing of the audit, and it's really useful that the tool provides us with a report. So just to summarize, what are the good things of our tool? What are the good things that we can get? So let's summarize a little bit. And the dubbies of our tool are that you relieve the pen tester from doing all these boring tasks. So I'm finding some IPs, I launch this again to look for more ports. So all these repetitive tasks are removed to the pen tester, so that he can focus on what he's interested. It's easy to integrate in DevOps environments, and API REST gives me the possibility of creating my own automatic launching scripts and launching it to continuous interaction tools or tools that we have that have been developed by ourselves. If you want to create a module to link it to the network, it's very easy. It is customizable. We can set it up. We can set the tools in real time, the connectors, in order to launch them with the configuration options that we want at every time. It's scalable. We can add new containers, new modules, and to conduct new microservices within this container so that we can make it grow, to put new tools as we want to do with them. And it's portable. In the end, it doesn't depend on the platform. With Docker Engine, I can do it. And last but not least, that makes a difference. In my opinion, this is what really makes the difference compared to other vulnerability scanners. In the end, we are able to keep on working after exploiting something. There are many vulnerabilities that after determining the vulnerability of the host or the target, they just rest there. So we go beyond. We are able to open new horizons and new hosts. Imagine that I come to a host and I find a new network. So I'm able to open towards that network knowing that there are new hosts, and I'm pivoting from that host. And I won't stay there. I go beyond in that exploitation. It's one of the most interesting options that we've thought about. So without further ado, let's move to the demo so that you can see that this is cool. We have a lab for this with 3 virtual machines. As you can see here, we have a router that we log into this this router with our device. We have 3 virtual machines and the other PC, out of which we have 2 windows. And here we have some password reuse, and another one we have leader credentials, and we have a Debian where we have a web app, and it has a form with SQLI. So let's see how is it possible to detect all the credentials and the vulnerabilities. So I give the floor to Alvaro so that he can show how the tool works. Okay, so let's get to work. Maybe the AVs won't like me because I'm going to change to double screen. No, everything worked. Okay, perfect. Okay, so as we've said, the app uses Keycloak for the authentication. So the first thing we have to do is to ask for a token with this body with safe password. So this works at my place, and I won't take the risk to change it. So we have to use this token for the rest of the requests that we make to the API. Now it would be 1 hour without refreshing it. We'll have to implement the token cycle. So we have it here, so we need to create the audit. So in the body, we can see that we define some details of the audit, the initial host, the initial network, and the connectors that we're going to use. We've defined a specific configuration, so we have another Nmap for the network discovery, Cobuster, DH client. If we need to specify anything special, when we ask for an IP, NICTO, so the tools that Jose Carlos has mentioned, once we send it, so come on, I want to see it. So do you want to have some surprise? No, stop calling Murphy. I want blood, mate. No, okay, so we can see the audit ID too. So with start method, we send it there and we launch it. And it will say that everything's okay, that it has started to execute it. So this is our virtual machine that is around. And we'll see that it is launching Nmaps, it's starting to scan, etc. So the point is that if it ends up scanning Nmap, well, it could take a long time. Here you can see how the different containers are launched and how they talk among themselves. The sub there is the core that is talking to Nmaps. So what we've done, well, I'm going to show how in the assets we have all the assets that have already been scanned, and it is processing 2 of them because we have a concurrence of 2. This is a database table of assets. All the assets will be found, will be stored here. So as we keep on scanning them, they will change their status, and either finish or receiving or whatever. So they are expecting an answer from the connector. As you can see here, we can ask for the audit status to see how it goes, and it will tell us what it has found, what it is making decision of, and if everything is done. Anything, sorry. And eventually, before showing the report, we want to show you how the database would be. Well, we've launched this audit, so it would take a little bit longer. So after the questions, let's see if it has worked. But well, in this case, we have one example. Here we have one on the database. So this would be an audit, a complete audit over this lab. We see that there are some services. It has retrieved some credentials, and it has retrieved the web that was not referenced. So referred, sorry. So everything that we found has been attacked. It has found some credentials, easy credentials, administrator and administrator. So it has downloaded the SAM. And it has used hashcat automatically to crack these hashes and to get the plain text password. We have a simple login app that was vulnerable to the SQL injection, and it has used it, taking the database name and all the information that can be returned by it. In this case, the database found is secret. This part is not extended, but the next point would be, well, if in secret there's any table of keywords that has SHA1 whatever, to try to crack it. Okay, so what we will show you is that, well, if we wanted to get the report of this audit, we would click here to send and download. Remember that the token is being sent in the background in every request. The report's a little bit dull right now. We want to adapt it to different customers, etc. Well, the information is really cool, but we want to put some graphs. Yeah, the summary, the report, sorry, just includes a brief summary of what it has found, an asset list. It is a direct dump from the database, but we should format this. This is what I was talking about, that we want to put it beautiful. After that, CVE or CPE or CWE. So it would appear here. So more details about a database. And I think that the graphs are great, but they still have not been done. So it would be really cool, believe me. Well, this is our demo. This is how our tool works. It is working. It does what we want it to do, what we wanted it to do. We want it to do much more. So I knew that this was going to happen because it happened during the rehearsals. So no surprise. Perfect. So we wanted to do many more things. And a little bit faster. One of the things that we want, and we've cheated on you a little bit, if you don't give some initial hosts, it is unable to listen to the network. Because I don't know if you know a little bit more about Dockers. I'm starting right now. We are unable to go out of the Docker network to see what's going on at the network that where we've logged or that we've connected. It's very difficult to create a physical interface in Docker that has direct access to the network. So we are struggling, and this is what we want to do. As some solutions, we had thought about virtualizing the Docker physically to plug in a BlackBerry or something like that. As it is modular, we have the possibility of using the same components, both in Dockers and Raspberry, and to use the tools that need direct access to the network card. And we want to use some plugins or scripts in order to exploit typical vulnerabilities that are important to do some kind of a plugin with a meta exploit to exploit the eternal blues. So having scripts not only for this but also for many more things. We want to be able to add real-time assets. As a pen tester, I come to a customer, I launch that cap, and I do my stuff on the other hand, and I discover important credentials with which this cap can get into devices and do other things. So with the audit that has already been launched, the fact of putting this asset that is a credential and to tell this cap to use it at the audit that's being launched is very important. We also want to have a front end. Now we're using Pondman that is not very beautiful. We want to have some graphs and so on and so forth, and otherwise we would have the command line. You like old things, huh? And we want to add more tools, and we want that the Swiss knife of the pen tester is here, and we want this to be amazing. We want to be this. We want that this is the Terminator, the network Terminator. We want to hit every network that we find. So, well, we don't want to. So we want to make this grow. We need talent. We need ideas. We need you. If you can think about things, well, now during the Q&A session, you can ask us about new ideas, about new contributions. You can go through the stand or contribute some ideas. Maybe if you want, you can join us in order to develop the your ideas and so on and so forth. We do many more things apart from this tool. And that's the point. We are really excited, as I'm telling you. And but we can't do this on our own. And we want to say thank you to the people that we have. And we want you to be part of all this. We'd like to say thank you for all the effort they've done. We'd like to say thank you to Manuel, thanks to Nacho, thanks to Miguel, and thanks to Miguel Trimil, that has also been here with us. And Sebas, he left. Well, he's in Mexico, I think. And if you want to be part of us, you know where we are. So we are waiting for you. And I would like to say thanks to Alvaro for his collaboration. Oh, today's his birthday, by the way. So a big round of applause. So let's sing happy birthday to you. So you've been sung happy birthday to you at the RootedCon. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much to everybody. And let's go to the Q&A session. So, proposal for architecture. In terms of Raspberry Pi to sniff and so on and so forth, why don't you use a packet broker service and you deliver the packets to the containers or to a master container that can handle them, that can tidy them up, that can put them on a database as a snort? This would be the analyzers. For the TCP packet, or you use a layer 2, layer 3 of the Raspberry that are controlling all the network areas, and so that they can feed it. Yeah, it's a very good idea. With a queue system. You're recording this, right? So hands up. Hello, where are you? Okay, thanks for the speech. I was wondering whether you were thinking of releasing this tool, asking for collaboration to the open source community, or if it's just a corporate tool. We're fighting for it. We're struggling because we have collaborated with some entities, and Alvaro and I, think that, well, at least at community level, we would like to do some things. Let's see if we can do some things. The monetization system has not been defined yet, but we would be very happy to have a community version of, or to try to have a new way of distribution based on open source, while selling support, and, well, something similar to OpenBAST. But it's not in our hands. We can make suggestions, but that's our job. But if we can, we'll do it, of course. More questions? I can't see more questions. I would like to ask, why haven't you used a vulnerabilities analyzer as a basis? I mean, you started from scratch. You started, well, everything from scratch, and you launch against some open source tools. Why did you use a vulnerabilities detector? Because it gives you less flexibility. You have less flexibility with it. It offers some things, but we wanted to have that information in raw before being filtered, because there were many things that, well, we got lost. So we wanted to start from scratch in order to have that raw information that maybe could be used by ourselves in another way. Anyway, we need to say that we have the possibility of, well, commercial vulnerabilities analyzer can be connected. We only have to develop a connector, and if the customer has a license, or we have a license that lets us conduct audits and so on and so forth, it would be just about sending the output to the result, and it would be handled as any other part. We've done something similar to what Alvaro is saying in the POC that we've done. Now, for this presentation, it didn't apply because we were connected to other tool that has been done by other entity team. It was a tool that analyzed vulnerabilities, but as a web. They logged to the website that you told them, and they returned the results. So we had a connection with this tool, but as they are in testing stage 2, sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. So we didn't have to set it up here. So our goal was to nail the analysis process in the database before starting to support tools, so that it could be a standard way to include tools in the app. Thank you. There's another one there. You see him? Well, first of all, congratulations, because what you've presented is great. This is the dream of any pen tester. The evolution of testing during the last decades has gone towards automation, and pen testing was unavoidable. So you've talked about treating the scan results in a modular way in order to take advantage the scans made with other tools. I was wondering whether it would be possible or not to do the same with the exploit part. I mean, you can only launch Metaxploit framework exploits, or is it possible to launch other events based on the results of the analysis? Like, for example, like Jenkins, for example, a pipeline to have your job custom when this happens, to have a more customizable behavior. Yeah, that's the word, custom. As you've said, we have thought, and well, the database structure has been created for that. We want to create exploit scripts custom. So when we have a specific type of asset, we have the possibility of saying, well, I found this asset for which the custom exploitation that I have here on the database, where I have many scripts custom done for this, because experience tells me that they've launched this script and it worked. So having different parameters, well, it works and it launches this exploitation. So we have thought about that, yeah. I hope I've answered your question. So last question before moving on to the last speech before lunch. So congratulations. I think it's a very cool architecture. Thank you. I'd like to ask you if you've seen any other tool, similar tool, or if you've been inspired by other tools, because it reminds me Molismero. So, and why did you decide to implement yours? It's not because of any tool. We made the decision because we wanted to automate the process, and we started to think about how to do it in a way that was not the same as any other tools that exist. And according to the tool, we wanted our tool to follow a very specific process. And we wanted to use the modular Docker system to make it more flexible, more scalable, more portable. It's true that there are tools like Cobalt Strike and Goldismero, but we don't see them that flexible to get into the database so that the decision maker can decide on his own what to do with it. And of course, the fact that it is company for the pen tester during the whole process. Thank you. Congratulations again. Congratulations. Yeah, congratulations to everybody. Thank you. Thank you, guys. So next speakers.